starting with a bang today. Senator Eric Schmidt has a great new book out. It's called The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court. He joins me live. Senator, good to talk to you. Are we sure that Missouri's still in the SEC? I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, 3-0 and got
Okay.
the Gamecocks at home on Saturday night. So here we go.
I thought maybe there was a Division A and Division B. I just keep missing it. Senator, this is a great book.
Oh, how
This is
dare
a
you?
fabulous book.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to begin. Hey, how did you get how did you find John Sauer? I listened to all of his arguments. He's a fabulous advocate. Where'd you find him?
You know what's unique about John is John is a St. Louisan like I am, and actually the same age. I've known John. He's an incredible talent. And he's one of these guys. He literally is the smartest lawyer I've ever met in my whole life, and he's humble and he's hardworking. Those are rare combinations. And he was my Solicitor General in Missouri, and now he's the Solicitor General of the United States. And a lot of the stories that we tell in the book, The Last Line of Defense, which I assumed you appreciate actually with the topics you always cover, was really about the success we had in taking on the left in the courtroom and kind of holding the line until President Trump and reinforcements could arrive in Washington.
I want everyone to know that if they want the gory details of what Senator Schmidt calls the quote the censorship enterprise of the Biden administration, it's all right here in one chapter. I'm not very often surprised, and I am rarely stunned. But I was really stunned by the list of demands that you put on page 97, 98 that the Biden administration made of social media companies during its reign of terror over social media. Were you stunned? Because 87 different people, 20 of whom, 83 federal officials, 20 of whom were at the White House, made demands on Twitter and other social media things. Were you amazed by this?
Yeah, that was really the discovery in the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit, Hugh, which you got to remember, this is before Elon Musk buys Twitter. This was all called the conspiracy theory. We filed the lawsuit. And this book takes you behind the scenes of some strategic decisions that were made, and not for lawyers, although I hope lawyers read it, but for people who are just watching this stuff unfold with like a disinformation governance board. We decided before we sought injunctive relief to stop the government from what they were doing, to get discovery. And when we got the reams of emails and text messages from high-ranking government officials directly in a secret portal to some of the biggest media companies in the history of the world to silence conservatives, it was shocking. I mean, then we took the deposition of Anthony Fauci. That's detailed in the book. We took the deposition of Elvis Chan, who was the FBI agent who was pre-bunking the Hunter Biden laptop story. So I think your audience is really going to enjoy this, but be equally shocked to the extent that the Biden administration went to silence conservatives.
One of the messages in Biden v. Missouri, or Missouri v. Biden, that you found out from the White House to Twitter, are you guys effing serious? I want an answer on what happened here, and I want it today. This is the government. You and I know about the First Amendment. Did they have no lawyers in the White House counsel's office? I mean, it's astonishing to me.
Everybody was on board, Hugh, and they felt so justified, whether it was on taking out President Trump's political supporters, or especially on COVID. I mean, I think one of the things I fundamentally believe is power doesn't necessarily corrupt, but it does reveal. And you saw during COVID what even local officials were willing to do. If you uttered anything negative about a vaccine or masks, they went to work. The CDC, Hugh, had specific words and phrases that they gave to social media companies to censor. So the government, of course, can't silence dissent, but you can't outsource that either, which is exactly what they were doing. And, there were other messages saying this comes from the highest levels of the White House. You know who the F I'm talking about. I mean, they were very explicit, threatening investigations, getting rid of Section 230 protections. They meant business. And it wasn't my words, but a federal district court judge said this was the biggest affront to the First Amendment in American history.
Very well laid out for laymen and lawyers alike. Let me talk about Elvis Chan, who you mentioned. I did not know the name until I read The Last Line of Defense. And Senator, I told Justice Barrett yesterday, and I remind you, you got to say the name of the book 7 times in every interview. Last Line of Defense, Last Line of Defense, so people in the audience will remember Last Line of Defense. I never heard about Elvis Chan until today. I want to talk about him, but I also want to talk about him in the context of the Kash Patel fiery exchange with Adam Schiff today in the Senate. And the conservative critics of Director Patel do not understand how deeply compromised a segment of the FBI is. It's really, really the administrative state fighting back against Director Patel and the Trump administration. Can you combine both? Let people know who Elvis Chan is and what he represents that Patel is up against.
I will, and you can read all about it in The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court, Hugh, available on Amazon and anywhere books are sold right now. But yes,
Bingo.
we took the deposition. We took the deposition of Elvis Chan, and what's really interesting is they were having. They knew the Hunter Biden laptop was real in November of 2019. Okay, it was authenticated. In 2020, they would have monthly, then weekly meetings with these social media companies in Northern California, which is where Elvis Chan was stationed, and told them, look out for a quote unquote Russian hack and leak operation. Yoel Roth, who was the integrity guy at Twitter, had in a sworn affidavit that he specifically mentioned the Hunter Biden laptop. So they know it's real. They're telling them this is Russian disinformation, the Hunter Biden laptop, and then they work overtime to censor the story. But it runs much deeper than that. In the prelude to the 2016 election, of course, you have the Russiagate hoax. You have all the stuff they tried to sideline an administration. The FBI was in on that with James Comey. And I'll also point out one of the real quirks of history. There was a guy that was the general counsel of the FBI in November of 2016. His name was James Baker. You want to guess who was the general counsel for Twitter in November of 2020? James Baker. So this runs really deep. This book helps expose the lie, and Kash Patel in the FBI has a big job in rooting out these administrative state actors that think they're more important than the people, and they think they can actually, sort of sideline a president and subvert the will of the American people. We can't have that in this country.
Every chapter is a revelation. I'm going to jump chapters now to the left-wing prosecutors, whether it is Kimberly Gardner in your home state in St. Louis, Larry Krasner in Philly, Chesa Boudin in San Francisco. They're all over the country. I want to know if you have an idea, a working theory of why Soros and his minions want to destroy law and order in the United States. What is the objective?
You know, I get that question a lot, actually, Hugh. And from my perspective, he sort of arbitraged the system. It was relatively inexpensive to elect these in Democrat areas, these radically progressive prosecutors who weren't interested in fighting violent crime. And by the way, said we're not going to prosecute other kinds of crime either. So he had a tremendous impact. Why? Well, if you want to actually remake society, people have to become discouraged. They have to feel like, society has sort of abandoned them. There's only one person in a jurisdiction that can make those charging decisions, and it's the prosecutor. You don't need a bunch of social workers. You need a prosecutor. Maybe you need social workers in the world, but for the one person that can make a charging decision, you need a real prosecutor. And it didn't used to be this way, Hugh. There were Democrats in St. Louis City that would prosecute violent crime that wasn't part of their ideology. But that changed a lot. And 2020, of course, was the accelerant in the summer of love. And Kim Gardner in St. Louis, we talk about in the book, The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court. She wouldn't really prosecute the rioters to the fullest extent of the law, but everybody remembers the images of the McCloskeys coming out to defend their property. Yeah. She was very much interested in prosecuting them, which of course would have a chilling effect on people exercising their Second Amendment rights. So this is very deep ideology that's meant to disrupt civil society. Then people, in that chaos, then they look for more government solutions and abandon sort of what America's always been.
Let's pause the interview there, and I will bring back more later. It's a wonderful book, but I got to take my relief factor, which is right here, because as I promised you yesterday, I was back on the highways and byways today and got my 5 in, and I'll probably feel it tomorrow, but not very much, because relief factor really does work. And I take it every day, and you can watch on the Salem News Channel. You hear me take it on the Salem Radio Network, all of our affiliates. It is a wonderful, wonderful supplement, the only one I've taken for more than 20 years. And I've been taking it for a dozen years on a daily basis because the Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, omega, they work. They get rid of the minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging. And if you're not doing the former, you should be, and you're definitely doing the latter, and you need all the help you can. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Get the starter pack for $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. And then start taking it 3 a day for the first week, 2 a day for the second week. Then you're on a 1 a day maintenance schedule and just keep taking it forever and you'll feel great. Or go to their website, relieffactor.com. Also want to tell you about andrewandtodd.com, great sponsors of mine. andrewandtodd.com will help you buy your home. andrewandtodd.com or Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Their number is 888-888-1172. They are lenders. 888-888-1172, andrewandtodd.com. No matter where you live in the country, no matter where you want to move to in the country, rates are down. The 10-year Treasury down to 4%, and they're falling, and the Fed's going to cut, and everything's going to be great. But get in the queue now. Get started. Soup to nuts with AndrewandTodd.com. Thousands of my audience, thousands, tens of thousands, have done their loans with AndrewandTodd.com, including me, including Dwayne, including perhaps you if you're listening right now. 888-888-1172. Whether you need a reverse mortgage for a senior citizen, whether you're a veteran, you don't want to put any money down, whether you need a FHA loan, whatever it is, no matter how much money you want to put down, go and check, get the best rates from AndrewandTodd.com at 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. Josh Holmes is the host of the Ruthless Podcast, along with Comfortably Smug, Michael Duncan, John Ashbrook. He joins me now. Mr. Holmes, it's a serious day, but I got to begin by noting I did listen to your Scott Cooper interview today, the new director of the OPM. I was impressed by that, but I got to say, little hurt. I was the former acting director, deputy director, and general counsel of OPM, and it's okay to call him really good, but I mean the best ever by a lot.
What?
I mean better than anyone who's ever been in that office before, because Connie Horner and I did our best, Josh, back in the Reagan years. We did our best.
Hugh, I thought of you immediately. Smug asked the question that you're referring to. He reached out to a friend of his who knew Scott pretty well, and this was his compliment, not ours. But as soon as it escaped his mouth, I was like, "Oh boy, you're gonna get some hate mail from Hugh on that one."
Well, I got him. I sent him a DM immediately. I said, "Shrapnel received." Now let's get very serious. I thought your guys' tribute to Charlie was fabulous over the last 3 shows. Now, I believe that you have a responsibility. I think you've got the most effective political podcast in America. Other people do other things very well, but you guys know politics. You know how to motivate the troops the way Charlie did. You've picked up the flag. You'll run with it. Those turning point chapters aren't going to go away, but they're going to need a lot of guidance that Charlie used to give them. And I think the 4 fellas, the 4 horsemen, you're the guys. Do you feel that responsibility?
No, look, the way I look at it is there's no one person that's ever going to replicate what it is that Charlie did on a day in and day out basis, right? He was a content provider. He was an organizer. He stood up for the first time this entire entity that was forward looking into a place where the progressive left thought they had a codlock for generations as far as the eye can see in young men and women, college students, and that kind of thing. But as I look at it, it's the same way that we've embraced it with Ruthless writ large, and the way that you handle things is that we all have a role, right? All of us have to pick up the shovel and start doing what we do and try to play a role in not only just replicating what it is that Charlie has done, but understanding that now more than ever is the time that is the most important, that people hear from us, that we're not intimidated or scared.
Now, one of the things you said today, Josh, was I thought we were all on the First Amendment bus. And we're not all on the First Amendment bus, obviously. And it becomes a different proposition when the radical left is saying, we're going to shoot these people. And I don't know what that's going to play. I think Kash Patel is the right guy for this. He's catching a lot of incoming for conservatives because he will mix it up with the left. And yeah, he got something wrong on a tweet. That's of no consequence to me. Do you think the conservatives understand how deep the deep state is? And I never use that term except in regard to a small portion of the FBI, but I do think he's got an uphill battle at the Bureau.
Oh, no question about it. And I think he's doing his very best. I have a lot of confidence that he gets to the bottom of things, whether it's politically popular or not. He obviously catches a ton of heat from the left just because of his public persona prior to his government service. But look, I think the larger issue here, Hugh, is whether we're going to grapple with a very real and growing issue on the left. We went through, the first 4 years of the Biden administration where you were dealing with a federal government that thought it was okay to censor and shut down speech altogether. And I think that was a byproduct of this modern left that believes that unless they're saying exactly what it is that they want to hear, that your opinion is not only not valid in a public sphere, but it almost ought to be eliminated whatsoever. Now, granted, that's an extreme point of view, and I hope it's a smaller contingent of the far left than it appears to be these days. But honestly, it's pretty scary out there. And until we grapple with these very real situations that are happening amidst a completely vacant leadership circle on the left in the Democratic Party, this is going to continue to be a problem for all of us.
Okay, I want to bounce an idea off of you. I have a column in the Washington Examiner tomorrow that begins, we need a Kirk Commission. Now, the Warren Commission gave commissions a bad name, but I think you're around Congress. You're a veteran. When the 9/11 Commission was stood up, maybe
Yeah.
not, you might not be old enough, but the 9/11 Commission did a good job. And I'm not looking for laws. I'm looking for answers as to what the deep web is doing to youngsters. And I mean the 18, 16 to 24-year-old radicals that are tossing themselves out on the street like this killer. Do you think that there is any role for a genuine, is it even possible to have a bipartisan commission look at the web? We can't legislate the web because of the First Amendment, but we can certainly warn people about what's on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a larger societal issue, much less of a government issue. But you have to have a national conversation. I think when you deal with Congress and commissions and things like that, where it often leads is in order to produce anything at all, you're going to have to do some level of both sidesism. And in my view, that's just absolutely not applicable to the situation that we find ourselves. I mean, just today, you see people crowded out in front of a New York courthouse cheering and exclaiming joy in that there were various components of charges against Luigi Mangione, the assassin of the United Health CEO,
Brian Thompson.
for being,
Yep.
yeah, for being dropped. And like, look, that's real. That's happening. That if that exists in our society, we are missing something very, very significant. And my this is my personal opinion. I think banning, shutting down, doing all these things from a government top down, it only exacerbates the problem. But there are things that governments can do. And I do think some fact finding, as you suggested here, Hugh, is probably necessary.
Well, let me close by asking you. You covered this today on Ruthless, and people should go listen to it. A Schumer shutdown is coming, and
Yeah.
it's inevitable. And you guys, you've lived it before. You know how bad it is. You know there can't be any Republican fingerprints on it. I don't think the Democrats care. I really don't think they care. They're lost.
Well,
What do you think?
it's. I think both of these things are intertwined that we're talking about. You have a leadership structure within the Democratic Party that is afraid of their own base. You recall that article that was printed in Politico a couple of months back that said that they're afraid of their own base. Their base is saying that we want blood, and they're concerned and afraid of all of that. And Chuck Schumer is a perfect embodiment of all of it. He knows that in order to stay on top of the Democratic Party in the United States Senate, he has to do irrational and dumb things that are not in the best interest of this country. But instead of, like, actual leaders do, instead of standing up to that and saying, like, I don't want a job if I'm going to run this country into the dirt, he's more than happy to placate that side of the thing, provided his name is above the door at the end of the day. And that's where we find ourselves in this government shutdown. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. But I do know that handing the microphone to Donald Trump for as long as he wants it, after the Democrats appear to do what they're going to do here, is not really a bad thing for conservatives.
Josh Holmes, thank you for joining me. Follow him on X at Holmes Josh. Listen to the Ruthless podcast. I genuinely believe it is the most important podcast for our young political class, anyone under 40 years old who wants to both know what is going on, what they are fighting for, and how to articulate it while having some laughs, because it's important, even in the darkest of times, to have some laughs. And there are no better guys than the fellows at Ruthless Podcast for doing that. Thank you, Josh. I'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned to the Salem News Channel. Stay tuned. And I am bringing you next David Drucker. We talk about the political blowback after the murder of Charlie Kirk. We'll talk about a Kirk Commission with him as well. As I say, it's in the Washington Examiner tomorrow. I liked the 9/11 Commission. Had a big, long title. Didn't need a big, long title. It was bipartisan. It was full of smart people like my old boss in the White House, Fred Fielding. And that's who they need to dig into what's going on in the dark web. David Drucker is in the house, chief political reporter for the Dispatch. David, Kash Patel had a fiery exchange with Adam Schiff today. Before I get to that, I want to ask you about conservative critics of Kash Patel. I push back hard against them because the director can only report what his field officers relay to him. They relayed to him they had a suspect. He posted it in an effort at transparency. It was wrong. But they caught the killer in 33 hours by flooding the zone with the image. I'm very happy with the director pushing hard against Adam Schiff and the knuckleheads. But you're in D.C. and I'm not right now. So you tell me, what is the order of magnitude about Kash Patel from the right? I don't care about the left.
Well, I think that there was always a lot of concern about Patel's ability to run the agency, but those that were concerned, on the right deferred because that's who President Trump wanted in the position. And so I think we have to begin there. I think, secondarily, the director fired a lot of what some people in Republican circles definitely believe were very capable agents. And there were even discussions about the fact that, there was a capable field agent in Salt Lake City who was running the field office there that had been fired. And so maybe they weren't as up to speed as they should have been. And so I think that if you had somebody like most directors have been in the past, who at least when they start out on the job are sort of career prosecutors or career FBI agents or just people that are in that world, that they may make mistakes and people are willing to look past them. I think people were a little bit more concerned here. Finally, I would just say that there was, although nobody's really talked about it much, there was some concern that ultimately the manhunt ended quickly because the family turned him in, and not necessarily because he was discovered. Now, he would have most likely been discovered eventually, given resources and given technology. But I just think there is a concern about how political Kash Patel is versus just how much of an FBI director he is.
All right, two questions. One, I think the FBI put out the photos that led the uncle to talk to the dad who went and got the killer. So I think the Bureau gets the credit for that. But also, this buzz of discontent about Patel, from whom is it coming? Has anyone put their name on it?
Well, no, nobody's put their name on it because nobody wants to make President Trump angry. But I'm just saying that you asked me sort of what's been circulating out there. There's been a general concern about competency and about whether or not the FBI is being politicized in one way, even if it may have been already, even if it was previously politicized in another way.
Now, so David, you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And we have both seen how attempts to take down people in D.C. proceed. I don't believe anything in the newsletters. Nothing. Unless someone puts their name on it, I don't believe it. Do you? I mean, I don't believe this.
Well,
I know that I've
I
had a couple of people write me.
Well,
but
listen, Hugh, I will say this, right? I mean, we all know that President Trump commands an enormous amount of influence with Republicans, and that his relationship with Republican voters is such that with primary season right around the corner, and it is right around the corner, only Republicans that are retiring from office and not running for re-election are willing to speak up. There have been complaints about the president for years, and they don't speak up or complain because they don't want their voters angry at them. And now, do I go and report all of these anonymous things? Well, no, of course not, because if you're not going to put your name on it, then it's not enough of a story unless I want to write a story about quiet complaints and the dynamic of people being afraid to speak up. But you asked me about it, and so I'm telling you that, sure, I don't believe everything I read either. It depends on who the reporter is, what outlet.
I was just trying to figure out if anyone, if you, because you cover the world, you know it all. Yeah. I just want to know if anyone had stepped out and put their name on it, because I don't think anybody has.
Right. I'm just saying that people, I mean, I haven't done a TikTok, and especially because I'm working on a story this week, so I've been a little buried the past couple of days with my own reporting on something else. But what I will say is this continues to be an issue that does exist, a dynamic that exists, where Republicans have issues with Trump or his personnel or his handling of a particular issue. Doesn't mean they want to impeach the guy or get rid of him or they're glad he won, but they have complaints. And in a world where the legislative branch actually exerted itself and wielded power and didn't just do nothing, they would do so, except that Trump's relationship with voters is strong and they don't want to get on the wrong side of that.
Oh, I couldn't agree with that more. David M. Drucker on X. Follow him there, chief political correspondent for the Dispatch. Thank you, David, as always, for joining me. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn is going to be the next governor of the volunteer state. She joins us now Senator Blackburn, welcome. Before I turn to some dark topics about the murder of Charlie, I did want to pass along my one of my wife's closest friends and oldest friends, Dr. Marcy, moved to Tennessee, got involved with the Isaiah 117 houses down there, told me that you're a big supporter of that effort. I'd never heard of them before. My hat is off to you and to Tennessee, where I think it began and it's spreading like wildfire across the United States. Boy, do we need Isaiah 117 houses.
Yes, indeed we do. It is something that has worked very well in our community because people that love the Lord and people that want to help rescue souls that are hurting and give them a safe landing spot, and that is what they're putting their energy into.
Well, I know you're looking forward to be governor. I want to ask, when you get there, what are you going to do about your schools? You've begun a charter school movement in Tennessee. It needs to get bigger and better. And now we've got this Gen Z problem of kids dipped in the deep internet who are becoming radicalized. And it's not something susceptible to lawmaking, but it is susceptible to education. How do you tackle that?
Well, actually, we have a hearing going on right now, Hugh. I stepped out of it to join you.
Oh, thank
And
you.
it is what is happening to kids with these chatbots. And last week, I held a hearing in the subcommittee I chair, Privacy, Technology, and the Law, on what is happening to kids in the metaverse. And indeed, social media platforms do have a responsibility on this. Right now, parents do not have a toolbox that they can use to work with their kids in order to put in place the protections they need. Social media platforms are not required to have a duty of care or safety by design in order to protect people when they are in that virtual space. And these chatbots are very sensual. They get into sensual conversations with children. They also promote adverse activity, suicide, cyberbullying, things of that nature. And we see in social media, whether it's Instagram or we've talked about Meta, we've talked about Snap. Of course, with the Charlie Kirk killing, the young man was on Discord, which is one of these platforms for video gaming. And what you see is the social media companies saying they have no responsibility. Indeed, they do. And it is
Well, the,
important that we pass the Kids Online Safety Act and we make certain that these platforms are held to account.
would the Kids Online Safety Act, Senator, allow for parents whose children have suffered harm to bring lawsuit? Because the moment that happens, the world changes because the trial lawyers will crush them.
And there is a right of action, but that they have a, or I should say, recourse. There is a channel for reporting these actions. Just like with my Report Act, social media is now required to report pedophiles to NCMEC, and then law enforcement can work with NCMEC on these traffickers and sex traffickers and pedophiles and predators that are going after children.
Now, Senator, if I can switch to a question about Charlie. Is Turning Point big in Tennessee? I don't know.
Yes, it is. We have several chapters that are in the state, and Charlie Kirk was someone that I so enjoyed working with, speaking at the Turning Point conferences, being on his program, and he was just such a great guy. I had recently texted back and forth with him about something, and my grandson had wanted to start a Turning Point chapter at his high school, and he was not allowed to do that. And I texted Charlie about it, and he came in supporting my grandson and encouraging him. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about Charlie Kirk is that he kids knew that he was for them. He was cheering for them. He was encouraging them. and he wanted the very best that life has to offer for them.
So, how is your reaction to the online hatred that is volcano like exploded in the aftermath of his assassination?
And it is just so horrific to me that we have people who would cheer the political assassination of an individual. To me, that is just something that is so foreign. What would cause someone to have that kind of hate and vile in their heart, that vitriol, that they would cheer that someone had been assassinated? And we've had some professors and some teachers in Tennessee. We also had a Secret Service employee that all ended up being dismissed because of what they were doing and what they were saying online. And how sad it is to see some of these individuals who are in positions of responsibility for our nation's youth out here cheering someone's death because of their beliefs and because of the words that they spoke.
And the last question, Senator, soon to be Governor Blackburn. There are whispers about attacks on Kash Patel, and I'm batting them down because I think he's got a very difficult agency to turn around, and I'm not sure that the administrative state is willing to work with him. What do you say to those critics of Patel?
And I was so pleased that we had Director Patel in front of us at Judiciary Committee today. And he did a wonderful job of making the case of why he is and how he is reforming the FBI, having them focused on the task. And to people that are a part of the deep state or part of the bureaucracy, you know, Hugh, they want the bureaucracy here in DC to grow. And of course, Kash said, we don't need a new building. Let me tell you where you can move us. We need agents in the field. Indeed, he has sent agents to Memphis to carry out Operation Viper, which has been enormously successful. Over 500 arrests of gang members, over 100 indictments, and more to come.
That's wonderful. Marsha Blackburn, always good to have you on the program. Thank you, Senator.
You got it.
Soon to be
Thank
Governor
you.
Blackburn. I want to begin with the market report brought to you by American Federal. You can call American Federal today at 800-221-7694. Nick Rovich and his team buy and sell gold. Gold just before the close is up about $6 an ounce to $3,725 an ounce today. It just goes up, up, up. $3,725.30. You didn't buy it last week because it had gone up. You didn't buy it the month before because it had gone up. You didn't buy it 3 months ago before it had gone up. Look, I don't give financial advice, but if you're waiting for it to go down, you better sit down because it's going to be a while, I think. But I don't give financial advice. I do give advice that if you're going to buy gold, do it with Nick Rovich and his team. They also sell, if you want to sell gold, they'll buy your gold. And remember, there's always a commission involved one way or the other. Got to make a living. But if you call American Federal, you do so at 800-221-7694. Now, the market today, right before the close, is down across the board. Dow off 0.2%, S&P down 0.06%, the NASDAQ is down 0.01%. Could all be green by the end of the day, but gold is up. And so the market's just treading water, waiting to see what happens with the Federal Reserve and all the goings on there. And central banks continue to buy gold, and individuals continue to buy gold because of diversification. Just remember, if you're going to buy gold, do it what I do. Buy it from Nick Rovich, 1-800-221-7694. Let me also remind you that our friends in Israel are approaching the end game in the Gaza City battle. The battle for Gaza City got underway last night with massive bombing, extraordinary violence, and more casualties on both sides. It is the necessary battle to bring the end to Hamas. And our friends in Israel need help. Benjamin Netanyahu announced yesterday they are an autarky, meaning that they have to be independent of everything. But they don't have to be independent of America. And the International Federation of Christians and Jews, ifcj.org, is running a fundraising campaign to raise money right now the variety of needs in Israel, and they are many in this long 2-year war as we come up to the second anniversary. So please consider a donation to ifcj.org. There is a wonderful opportunity right now to show that they are not alone, that they have friends in the world. Those friends are in America and around the world. I want you to know the size of the challenge after this war from Amit Segal yesterday. Since the October 7th massacre, there have been 20,000 wounded IDF soldiers. Another 20,000 are expected by 2028. There's a severe shortage of caregivers. The ratio is one caregiver for every 750 wounded people. More than half of the soldiers suffer from PTSD who are wounded. Only 48% of that subgroup have been able to go back to work. Israelis wait 3 to 4 months for an appointment. Look, the ISCJ knows all about this, and the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews will help. They have a long-standing ties with the best organizations in Israel. They know who needs the money. They know who needs the help. Please be generous in your contribution to ifcj.org, ifcj.org. I'm joined this beginning of the program by Brett Baer, host of Fox News Special Report every night at 6 p.m. Brett, welcome. You've been in the business a long time. You arrived in D.C. on 9/11, I believe, as the Pentagon reporter. I've been doing it for 35 years. I've seen a lot of bad stuff, covered the LA riots, 9/11, everything that 10/7 murders, all sorts of stuff. I've never had a colleague assassinated before. I think you've been doing a fabulous job, and I want to thank you for it because you brought in people like Ben and Mary Catherine and Guy Benson, his contemporaries, to talk about him. But how do we cover this story, and how long do we cover this story for?
Well, first, obviously it was a major gut punch. A lot of folks dealt with Charlie. I had talked to him a few weeks ago. And really, he was close to a lot of folks here. So it's uniquely tough for our business and colleagues. But it is really important. I think there's the investigation and figuring out all the who, what, where, when, and today lended a little bit more information into that. But then there's the fallout from it and the political impact and the reverberation, not only here in the country, but around the world. And so as you see these vigils all over the place, I think it's very powerful. And there is some kind of silver lining to what has been a dark week plus.
There's one aspect of it. I talked to Justice Amy Coney Barrett yesterday. Long interview. Did 2 of them in the last week because she got a new book out, listening to the law. And I talked to her as a parent with young children about the web. You raised 2 fine boys. I love my 2 fine boys. They're older than yours. And I'm glad I didn't have to deal with this. Have you talked to parents of younger children who have to deal with this dark web craziness?
Yeah, well, first of all, my 2 boys were shaken up, 18 and 15, and they were folks who listened to Charlie online and had a knowledge of him from his sites and all of that. And then that day, obviously saw that very public and gruesome shooting online. And, it took a lot to talk them through all of that. And I can only imagine, younger kids and being exposed to that. Hopefully not too many were, but a lot were because it made its rounds very quickly on that day.
So what do you expect the political effect of this to be? And I return to my original question. I can't stop thinking about it and talking about it, but I don't know when it will be appropriate to do so.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think we're still, in the process of processing. Tonight I have a common ground with Senators Dave McCormick and John Fetterman, who asked to be on set together to talk about the climate and how things need to change. And that was an ask that came to us. We didn't go to them. So I think there's more talking to do, more things to talk about. I do think that we don't fully have a sense of the political impact. I know the stats are pretty amazing. You know, Charlie wanted to expand to something like 1,500, you know, of his chapters, and now there's 30,000 plus who've called up and said, I want to start a chapter. And, you know, that impact and that expansion, what does it mean? You know, politically, what does it mean? I do know anecdotally that people have reached out to me and said, you know, churches were filled with young people over the weekend, and there was some kind of thing happening. And I've heard that from a lot of different corners.
Now, over to the Bureau. Kash Patel had a very bare-knuckled exchange with Adam Schiff of California in the Senate today, and I think Schiff got the worst of that. But there's this buzz, and I talked about it with David Drucker. I don't credit it much because no one puts their name to it, but have you heard, Kash Patel messed this up, he's not up to that? It's just not true, but it's out there, nameless, formless, circulating. Have you picked it up, Brett?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's some reporting in our circles that came from anonymous sources, but then the president kind of put a kibosh on that when he was asked directly about it. And I think Dan Bongino has talked about that storyline. But clearly there were anonymous sources, anonymous folks inside the administration and inside justice talking to reporters about the fallout, and not only this, but other things. It seems like he's on solid ground, at least for now, and I'm sure the president enjoyed that dust-up with Adam Schiff.
Now, I do remember a bureau that was very different when I worked in the Reagan Department of Justice and the Reagan White House and the Reagan OPM. The bureau was very different. It was not political. It was post-Hoover, so there was almost a reverse Hoover reaction going on then. And now I don't trust it at all because of the McCabe, Stroke, Page years. Where are you on the bureau? In D.C., not the field offices, not the SACs, although there might be some that are politicized. What do you think about the Bureau?
Well, I agree with you that there have been questions based on those investigations into what we know from the Russia investigation and Crossfire Hurricane, et cetera. And we're still learning things about all of that. That leadership has obviously changed. There are very good people at the FBI. And, you know, we try to cover it, that and justice in a very straight way. We've had access and have had questions answered. So it's a little bit more transparent than it was under the last administration.
Last question, Brett. You've got friends in Qatar. You talked to the Prime Minister when you were over there in a memorable interview. And, of course, Israel struck it. I've got Haviv Rettig Gur coming up right after you. He has raised the question about whether or not Israel is a one-trick pony. Do they know how to be wise in the use of force, et cetera? Have you heard from your friends in Qatar about the after effect of the Israeli strike on the Hamas leadership that did not work?
Yeah, obviously they're still digesting all of that as well. And I think that it has changed the dynamic. There is a lot more unity in the Gulf nations. There is less talk about, expanding the Abraham Accords, and there's more talk about threatening the existing Abraham Accords. There's, a real down thought about Israel's actions, specifically because they went to a target they didn't get and went into another sovereign country. So, the pushback from the Israelis is that they were going after terrorists, and the U.S. does it in the sovereign nation of Pakistan, going after al-Qaeda. But it does feel a lot different, and it has changed the dynamic on the ground in the Middle East.
Well, thank you for joining me. Thanks for your coverage of Charlie, and I'll be watching Dave McCormick and John Fetterman tonight on the Common Ground segment on Special Report. Brett Baer, thank you very much. Host of Special Report Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. on the Fox News Channel. I want to remind everyone, I am sponsored by webroot.com/Hewitt, webroot.com/Hewitt. You need Webroot. You need to be protected online because there are a lot of malicious actors. 600,000 of you have watched my video with Victor Davis Hanson, and many of you have written to me that you were stunned that Victor fell prey to hacking. And he's a pretty smart guy, obviously, but smarts don't protect you from these rogue criminals online. You need WebRoot Total Protection. Covers identity protection for up to 10 identities, up to $1 million in fraud expense reimbursement, 24/7 US-based customer support. You get antivirus protection, you get a secure VPN, a iCloud backup for your devices, your personal information, your privacy. You must protect it. WebRoot Total Protection gives the insurance you need for your digital life and your peace of mind. Go to webroot.com/Hewitt, webroot.com/Hewitt. Let me also tell you, if you're over 50, our other sponsor is Consumer Cellular. Let me get the phone number right. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. If you're over 50, especially, you want to call them and use my code HUGH25. That gets you $5 off each of your first 5 invoices. Get your phone bill out, find it online, make sure you find out what are you paying for data. Because if you're over 50 and you're one of those people who just want to have unlimited data, you will get 2 lines of unlimited data for $60 a month. I bet that will beat whatever it is you're paying right now for unlimited data. And maybe after you study, you decide, I don't need unlimited data. I want to keep my number, I want to keep my contacts, I want to keep it all. That's fine. You can keep your device, get a new one. But consumercellular.com/Hugh, they will give you the right amount of data that you need. You might only need 5 gigs, you might need 10 gigs, whatever it is. Call and find out. 800-411-4454. That's 800-411-4454. And remember, my code is HUGH25 for $5 off each of your first 5 months when you make the switch to Consumer Cellular. If you missed it, there were fireworks in the Senate Judiciary Committee today between Adam Schiff and Kash Patel, the director of the FBI. You should hear it all. Cut number 3.
No, I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of inmates. What I am doing is protecting this country, providing historic reform, and combating the weaponization of intelligence by the likes of you. And we have countlessly proven you to be a liar in Russiagate, in January 6th. You are the biggest fraud to ever sit in the United States Senate. You are a disgrace to this institution and an utter coward.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised that you continue to lie from your perch and put on a show so you can go raise money for your charade. You are a political buffoon at best.
Well, you can take an internet troll.
Take it to the bank that the FBI is protecting this country and the state and citizens of California. We are bringing historic reform.
Point of order.
But all you care about is a child sex predator that was prosecuted by a prior administration, and the Obama Justice Department and the Biden Justice Department did squat. And what did President Trump do? Bring new charges courageously. And what have we done?
Chairman,
you said I'm the most
control of this
transparent FBI director in history. 33,000 pages of information to you. I challenge you to say anything credibly to the truth. Go ahead and run to the cameras where you want to go now.
Kash Patel won that round. Now I talk with Alex Gray. Alex is the CEO of American Global Strategies. He was the chief of staff of the National Security Council under President Trump in his first term. We have some trouble getting him. Why don't we get him by phone then? Because I do want to hear what he has to say about Kash Patel. Meanwhile, here's what Kash Patel had to say about the shooter today. Cut number 7.
Did Mr. Kirk's assassin act alone?
As I've said since the beginning, Senator, it is very much an ongoing investigation, and I can't speak to the state charges. That's for the state to address on their own, but we are providing them with the same investigatory findings reporting the department. And as I noted to Senator, I believe it was Cornyn or Hawley, that there are a number of individuals that are currently being investigated and interrogated, and a number yet to be investigated and interrogated specific to that chat room. So we are very much in our ongoing posture of investigation.
So
I'm glad he's pushing back at Adam Schiff. I'm glad he's in control of the investigation. I'm glad that Alex Gray joins me by phone now. A little video problem. Alex, when you were at the NSC and at the White House and Trump won, did you work with Director Patel at all?
I worked with Cash very closely, Hugh, and I know him very well. He was one of the best senior directors at the NSC. He was the president's chief counterterrorism advisor for a number of years, and just a stellar person as an individual. But the key thing, Hugh, and this is why I think what you saw in that performance and that hearing was so exceptional. You know, Cash is speaking as what I've said publicly is he is the most qualified person on national security grounds to ever serve as director of the FBI. You look at the backgrounds of every other person to serve as director, no one has more cumulative national security experience than Cash does. He was chief of staff of the Pentagon. He was a Joint Special Operations Command attached lawyer. He was a counterterrorism senior director at the NSC. He was a deputy director of national intelligence. It's an extraordinary resume, and what makes it so effective that he is in that position right now is this has become a national security threat that we're facing, Hugh. This isn't just a law enforcement matter. And having Cash in that seat, I think that's why I feel so confident about the direction we're headed in this situation.
You know, my former colleague, Seb Gorka, I believe is the senior director for counterterrorism now at the NSC. What is the portfolio for that job that Ambassador O'Brien was the national security advisor, you were the chief of staff? What was Cash doing?
Well, anytime there was a counterterrorism mission, think Baghdadi, Soleimani, think about hostage rescues, any of the high-profile counterterrorism-related incidents of the Trump era, all of those missions, all of those reactions to very real threats around the world, all of that ran through the Directorate for Counterterrorism run by Kash Patel. And so the extraordinary successes that President Trump had on the counterterror front in his first term, I would give a big amount of that credit to folks like Kash. Think, again, Baghdadi, Soleimani, the destruction of ISIS, huge victories over al-Qaeda all over the world. Kash's professionalism and his ability to execute on serious threats, huge part of that, Hugh.
Now, Alex Gray, you know how D.C. works, especially inside the Bureau and inside DOJ. There are a lot of career people. They don't like to be pushed around by politicals, number one. But the Bureau has changed from my years there in the Reagan Justice and White House and OPM. And the director's role has changed from the years of William Webster and Louis Freeh. It's not button-down G-men anymore. It's brass knuckled. And after the last 10 years, I don't know who to trust in the Bureau.
Well, there are two things, as you say, Hugh, that have changed, right? You know, Judge Webster, Judge Freeh, they were, in their essence, they were law enforcement officials. They were respected attorneys who came into that world from the world of law enforcement as prosecutors, U.S. attorneys. That's been the traditional background of an FBI director. Unfortunately, the world in which we're living is one, whether it's these domestic terror threats or it's the very real threats we face from Chinese espionage, from Russian espionage, from Iranian-backed terror cells. The world we face is not one where necessarily the skill set for an FBI director is having been a stellar criminal lawyer. The skill set that I think is best utilized now to do the job of the FBI director, think Britain's MI5. Think something like a domestic intelligence agency whose job is to protect us from threats, not necessarily just investigate and prosecute. That's why Kash's particular skill set is so valuable at this moment. And then your other point, Hugh, about how the Bureau has changed. I think, we'll only fully appreciate it 20, 30 years from now, but the Obama administration turned the FBI from this incredibly respected across party lines organization into an organization that was deeply political to its core and valued a certain left-leaning ideology over being a neutral law enforcement agency. And President Trump in his first term made some progress towards rooting that out. But honestly, until this term, we have not been able, with Pam Bondi as the Attorney General, with Kash at FBI, they are finally making progress on changing the culture of the FBI from this progressive ideology that flourished in the Obama era, and rooting it out and turning it back into a neutral agency of law.
Alex Gray, CEO of American Global Strategies and former Chief of Staff at the National Security Council, thank you for joining me today. I do believe that the whisper campaign against Kash Patel is coming from, I don't use the term deep state, but from the careerists and the bureaucrats and the ideologues inside the Bureau and the DOJ, unhappy at having someone who is wholly unafraid of them. In yesterday's interview, Justice Amy Coney Barrett remarked to me, as we discussed Charlie Kirk's assassin, that she believed he was mentally ill. So do I. Many of you wrote me overnight or posted, "We've got to give up this insanity defense stuff. He's not insane. He knew what he's doing." She didn't say that. It's very different. Mental illness is very different from an insanity defense. But to talk about that with some actual skill and experience, Andrew C. McCarthy, longtime prosecutor in the Southern District of the United States, agreed to join me on short notice today. Andrew, thank you for doing that. I appreciate your being here. Can you explain to people, A, for your experience with an insanity defense, and B, why it wouldn't apply to this guy?
Well, Hugh, in almost every violent crime case, and certainly every violent murder case, there's at least some thought to running with an insanity defense. And you are always dealing with people, well, always is an overstatement, so I don't want to, especially given the background of our conversation, I don't want to be accused of overstatement. But let's say in a high percentage of cases, you are dealing, since you're dealing with murders, you're dealing with people who are unstable and very often have mental problems. But as you just suggested, the issue that you have in an insanity defense is very different from saying that somebody has mental illness. In an insanity defense, there's always there's basically two issues that come up in every one. One is, could the person appreciate right from wrong when the person acted? And then the subsidiary issue is always, is the person stable enough to face trial, which is a different thing from what the person's state of mind was at the time the event took place. So those issues come up in every case. I had a guy in a terrorism case whose defense was that he had lots of mental problems and was, as his lawyer put it, I don't think you're allowed to say this anymore, but his lawyer described him as borderline retarded. And his defense was that he couldn't form specific intent to make or conspire with people to levy war against the United States. And it was obvious that both that he did have some mental issues, and secondly, that he absolutely appreciated right from wrong and knew what he was doing in terms of agreeing with other people to conduct violent jihad attacks against the United States.
So what happened? I remember you got the blind shake. He died in jail at Supermax. What happened to this guy?
We got all of them. No, they were all convicted of seditious conspiracy and the various other charges that we had in the case. And I don't really think there were a lot of issues in the case, Hugh, that I was kind of concerned about. This guy was not one of them. I was always very confident we'd nail him.
Now, we are thousands of miles away, and we don't know anything beyond what we read in the newspaper. But I know that Hinckley got off on the insanity defense, and I know McCarrick didn't stand trial for his various crimes as cardinal in D.C. because he didn't have capacity. I don't think this is remotely like that from what I see. Do you?
No, in fact, I think it's interesting because we have two cases now going at the same time, right? We have this awful case involving Charlie Kirk, and then we have this other case that just horrific case that came to everybody's attention in Charlotte about, I want to say a week before or so. It seems to me that the defense lawyers in that case have a lot more to work with in terms of an insanity defense. If half of what the prosecutor said today in that narrative is true, the evidence powerfully shows a lot of planning, thoughtful motive. Now, again, I don't want to be misunderstood here. his motive obviously is repulsive. The issue for us lawyers clinically is, can he form coherent thoughts? Can you rely on what he expressed about his reasons for doing what he did? This is very important because to prosecute a case like this successfully, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this was intentional murder, and there are exacerbating factors here that go to his motive. So if you had a situation where there was any doubt about the coherence of his thought process, you would have a problem. But what we saw from written chats and conversations and that sort of thing, it actually shows a thoughtful plan, a lot of thought going into it, a lot of thought going into the escape from it and trying to conceal the evidence. And I thought even the fact that he apparently withheld from the roommate that he had done it, that even showed thoughtfulness.
Yes, it does. You listened to the Justice Barrett interview. Did you even raise an eyebrow when she said mentally ill? I didn't, even though I got a bunch of stuff saying bad, 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 bad.
Yeah, I didn't. I did listen to it, and I didn't. My antennas are pretty good at pinging when that kind of stuff happens, and nothing occurred to me at all that would be problematic. And I would just say, like as a matter of background, I had the pleasure of meeting Justice Barrett once, but I didn't spend a lot of time with her, just a little bit of friendly chit chat. So I don't know her. But I do know that she may be the smartest lawyer in America. She's certainly one of them.
Oh, you bet. I do not want to ever be an oral argument before her if you're on the opposite side of her view of the law. But now what I want to know from you, Andy, is this a federal or a state case, do you think? And if you're an AUSA, do you want the case against Charlie's assassin? And if so, what do you want to see happening right now?
I think this is a straightforward state prosecution. I think it'd be a mistake for the feds to do anything now other than what I believe they're doing and hope they're doing, which is lending resource and especially forensic support to the state prosecutors. It's just a fact, Hugh. I've been in a couple of these cases where, we brought violent crime cases. We had, arguable federal jurisdiction to do it. I had one case where it was a brutal shooting of an undercover cop where a jury hung after 9 days. And the prosecutors can talk to the juries when they hang. And one of the things that bothered them is, why are we in a brutal attempted murder case talking about interstate commerce? We couldn't understand what that had to do with anything. And the problem for federal homicide cases is you have to prove a jurisdictional hook beyond a reasonable doubt that doesn't always seem to the common sense person to have much nexus to what the case is about. Whereas in the state, they simply have to prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. They don't have to say that there was some federal interest. They don't have to prove interstate commerce. They don't, it's just much easier. So I really hope that that's what's going to happen here. And off the top of my head, I have to say, maybe you have a better idea than I do. I don't see a federal homicide charge out of Charlie's assassination. Just full disclosure, I didn't see one in the Charlotte case either, and they have indicted that one on what I think is a stretch of a legal theory that, there's a effect on mass transportation, on a terrorism theory.
That's going to be tough to do.
Yep.
Let me talk to you about the underlying dark web cesspool out of which this Discord channel lifted a group of crazy people. If there's a conspiracy there, if there are other people involved, and that has not yet been put into evidence to my satisfaction, but if it's the case, does that change your estimate of this at all?
Yeah, well, if they're using facilities in interstate commerce, at least the feds now have something to play with. The problem I see, you, and look, this is an early stage, right? The feds are rolling up their sleeves. They've just started. They're going to dig into every single potential internet channel, et cetera. But from what I see in the chat that has been revealed so far is that Robinson tells them in the way of surprising news that he's the one who did it. And he also tells them that he's arranged to surrender to the authorities. So I don't really see anything implicating other people just on the basis of that. And then we heard the prosecutor's summary today, and what he says is that Robinson even kept this from the roommate, who, all eyes have fallen on until after it was over. So at least the way the trajectory of the evidence looks right now, it looks like this is something that he schemed, that he felt very strongly about, and he probably didn't have accomplices before the fact. After the fact, we'll have to see how that all works out. But
Now, Andy, last
again,
question. He self-radicalized. He didn't go to college and take the wrong courses. He dropped out after one semester. And I have a column come out in the Examiner tomorrow calling for a Kirk Commission, not like the Warren Commission. We know who did it. But into the circumstances of youth who end up self-radicalized, like the killer in Minnesota and the killer in Nashville and the killers in Minnesota and killers. What do you think? Do we need to figure out what's going on? I don't know that we can actually legislate about it because of the First Amendment. Do we need to know the facts about what is going on in the dark web?
I think we absolutely need to know the facts. Now, whether you can do anything about it around the First Amendment is one thing, and whether there are crimes that you could create or at least other legal requirements that you could create, that's another question too. But it seems to me that the legal consequences of this, which are profound, are nevertheless downstream from the cultural ones. And I can't think of anything that would be more important to at least get a reasonable, realistic handle on what we're dealing with. And then we can talk about what legal remedies there are. But I don't even think we're at the stage of knowing.
Well, you've dealt with radicalization your whole life, but you did with Islamist radicalization. And there's a pattern, right? Do you think that pattern is self-generating at the dark web level?
I think it could be, although you would think that it would be easier to uncover. I called my first book about this willful blindness,
right? Because
not only was my lead defendant willful and blind, the malady I was trying to get at was the fact that we were closing our eyes to the ideology. So you had this dynamic of a scriptural ideology that was being mediated by people like the blind sheikh, and it was animating these young Muslim men. And we were able to prove that in the trial, but the government never wanted to talk about it because of religious liberty. I don't think...
Pause for a moment, Andy. I got to go to a break. I want to ask one more question of you off air, and I'll put it on the podcast so that people can hear it and in the YouTube video. And then I hope you and Rich dive deep into it, because it's a question about whether or not the 9/11 Commission actually did any good, and whether or not a Kirk Commission would, if it was genuinely bipartisan, run by very smart people, as the 9/11 Commission was genuinely bipartisan, if it would work. Did the 9/11 Commission work? Would one similarly constructed work here about this subject?
I thought the 9/11 Commission report was pretty good. I was not a fan of the 9/11 Commission. I think they were ultimately bipartisan, but they were very partisan for the first two-thirds of that investigation. And then I think when they realized that both the Clinton people and the Bush people stood to be burned by some of the stuff they were doing, they kind of called a truce and put the FBI and the CIA and the rest of those guys on trial. And then the solution was ridiculous to my mind. If your problem is sharing information, what they proposed was to put yet a 17th bureaucracy on top of the intelligence community in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And the original idea, Hugh, for the Department of Homeland Security was they were going to fix the problems that came up with intelligence sharing. But, of course, the Bureau went to war on Capitol Hill to keep their job as the domestic security service. And by the time the Homeland Security Department got created, it was basically there to house a bunch of agencies
TSA.
the revamped Justice Department didn't want. So it was like the classic rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Well, I'm hoping if they do this, that they focus on the predicates for radicalization, like the way you did in your books. And your books led me to Lawrence Wright, led me to understand what Al Jazeera does, led me to understand what Wahhabism is. I think we need the same kind of explanation. I hope they make you their general counsel, Andy, if it happens. Thank you for joining me, friend. When are you taping the McCarthy report next?
I think we're on for Thursday morning.
By that point, that will be one heck of an episode. I'll look forward to it. Thank you, Andrew McCarthy.
Thank you.
I have great sponsors on this program, great sponsors on this program. The best, of course, is Relief Factor. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. They make it possible for me to go anywhere at any time and be on both coasts and in the Beltway. And I got to tell you, wherever I am, whether it's Southern California, the way north, or the Beltway, which is most of the time, I'm out and about getting my miles in. And I had to take 8 days off for a variety of reasons, including a back and forth across the United States that cost me my voice and all that stuff. But I'm back out doing it today. Got my 5 miles in. I may feel that in the morning. We'll find out. But I don't think so because I took my Relief Factor every single day. And I took it again on the Salem News Channel. You saw me do it in the first hour. And I remind you, you ought to be trying it yourself. $19.95 for the first pack, the starter pack. That's less than $1 a day because it's for 3 weeks. 3 packets a day on the first week every day. 2 packets a day on the second week every day, and then you're a packet a day person for the rest of your go. And most people keep taking it. 7 out of 10 people who try it say, wow, that's fabulous, and they keep taking it. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. I want to close the hour by talking about the Schumer shutdown and StopHealthCostHikes.com. StopHealthCostHikes.com is run by our friends at Americans for a Balanced Budget. And they are a great group of conservatives who want a balanced budget, but they also don't want to screw people who got forced into the Obamacare exchanges. So they opened up StopHealthCostHikes.com. Now, Chuck Schumer is trying to justify shutting down the government by wrapping himself in, let's help the people screwed by Obamacare. And he doesn't really want to help. If he did want to help, they could have fixed this years ago. It's got to go through regular order. They got to talk about how to fix Obamacare, and when they fix Obamacare, they have to extend tax credits for those who are caught in Obamacare. And caught there because they lost their job, they lost their plan, they didn't keep their doctor, they didn't keep their plan as President Obama promised. Obamacare is a nightmare and a disaster, but we don't want to leave people on the raft floating out to sea. So that's StopHealthCostHikes.com. If you're an Obamacare insurance participant, you're getting your insurance plan through a state exchange, you want to visit StopHealthCostHikes.com and get involved right today. StopHealthCostHikes.com. I want to close with a little Kash Patel, if I can, talking about anti-Catholic bias and how he's going after it. Cut number 6.
We have 60 anti-Catholic hate crime incidences reported to us that are being investigated. Publicly, I can tell you we have 5 hate crime investigations with anti-Catholic bias ongoing currently in the states, in the cities of Kansas City, Louisville, Houston, Nashville, and Richmond. That's what I can say publicly. But any ideologically based attack against any faith, as a man of faith myself, will not be tolerated, and the full resources of the FBI are committed.
That is great news. Director did a great job today. I'm glad Alex Gray was available to defend him against this whisper campaign coming out of the permanent government, and we will continue to do so. Rich Lowry is the editor of National Review. He's the host of the National Review podcast, The Editors, and he's looking very, very straight and narrow today. Rich, you're not relaxed at all. You're standing up, and you've got your suit and tie on. What are you doing? Is there like a meeting with the board of the National Review?
Yeah, exactly. I am in a corporate-like conference room, so maybe that accounts for my demeanor.
No, you look very corporate. I just got done talking to Andy McCarthy, and I know you're going to have a fabulous bang-up McCarthy report this week to walk us through the intricacies of the assassination of Charlie. But I saw that an editor's dropped during my show, a new edition of the Editors. Give me a little preview about what the guys covered and who was on it. Was it Charles C.W. Cook and Noah and Jim?
And Jim. Yeah, so we talked about some of the gaslighting we've seen about Tyler Robinson, which is now totally unsustainable now that we've seen the charging document, which is even more damning than you would have expected. But we saw a lot of Democrat supporters saying, oh, this guy, we don't know much about him, or he's from a Republican family, or he's a groyper on the right. And as the charging document makes clear, he became increasingly left-wing over the last year, more gay rights and trans rights oriented, as his mother put it to prosecutors. And then we have these really damning text messages immediately after the assassination, where he was clearly motivated by stopping what he considered Charlie Kirk's hate. So shame on everyone who's called Charlie Kirk a hater, but this guy took it seriously and thought a gun was the only answer.
So we don't have much doubt, and I don't believe there's ever going to be much doubt. There might be some accomplices. Andy pointed out we might find some stuff out. It's a state crime, Andy told me, not a federal investigation. Mm-hmm. But tomorrow I'll have a column in the Washington Examiner that calls for a Kirk commission. Not a Warren commission to find out who did it, but more of a 9/11 commission to dive into the deep web and find out what is happening, not just here, but in the murder of Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, in the murder of the Minnesota people. Yeah, we got a long list of them back to the softball field. And of course, the left will say January 6th, but that's been asked and answered. What do you think? Do we need that, Rich? Because I have no idea what is going on in the Discord channels of this world.
Yeah, sure. Did you know what notices bulge, OWO, what's this meant?
I do now.
Yeah, you do now, right? So, yeah, I think that could be illuminating. More transparency is better. This is clearly a really prevalent phenomenon and a disturbing one where we're acculturating, especially young men, into this thoroughgoing nihilism and also this world of gender fluidity. And it's I just want to, there are many layers to this event, but one of them is Charlie was the normal one, right? Charlie was the father, married father with 2 kids. He believed in traditional gender roles, and he was killed by someone who represented kind of a more aberrant lifestyle and point of view. But we've had a elite culture, especially on campuses, trying to tell us a lie that it's the conventional views that are out of the mainstream and that are wrong and perverse and hateful.
Now, I believe Chris Rufo is right when he wrote the American Cultural Revolution about what's happened to campuses, but I don't think it's applicable here or at Annunciation Church in Minneapolis or at the Nashville shooter. They self-radicalized, and they did it on the web. And I don't know what to do about it because the First Amendment protects with like an iron wall. I know the First Amendment law pretty well and been teaching it for 30 years. You really can't regulate the web, but you can educate parents and a culture as to what's going on there in the way that Andy McCarthy did in his book Willful Blindness, which first opened my eyes to Wahhabism.
Yeah, totally. Right. And one reason we're never going to quite go back to how bad things were in the late 60s and the early 70s, people forget there were quasi-insurgent groups in the United States of America, right? You could be the Symbionese Liberation Army and survive for a pretty long time in Oakland. You'd have a safe house, you'd operate on cash. There are no credit cards, there are no mobile phones tracking you everywhere, no surveillance cameras. So there are, in fact, these ungoverned spaces that allow these groups to operate. So if you're a group now, we're going to run you down, you're not going to exist. But if you're an individual, that's much more difficult. So that's why the political terrorism that we've seen has, as you point out, been self-radicalizing individuals. And I don't know what to do about that. If we had a healthier culture, it would help a lot. If this guy were going out and playing touch football every weekend with a bunch of friends, that might have helped. But we have people just sitting at home.
What scares me.
Yeah.
He seems like a traditional LDS family, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That means he went to seminary before school 3 or 4 times a week. He's a religious family. Their theology is not my theology, but it's a very disciplined theology, and the family structure is intact. And most of the LDS that I know, from Mitt Romney on down to my buddy O'Brien, they're all wonderful people. And I don't know how a kid like that can go off the rails, and I think we need to know. Jonathan Haidt did the book The Anxious Generation, and that's part of it. But that was really about teenage girls, and what happens to their self-image and stuff. It wasn't about this.
Yeah. So clearly, this is not a story of childhood deprivation. It's not a story of mental illness. I mean, he was very rational, and what he was doing was horrible, but he went about it in a very rational manner. This wasn't a guy out of his mind, and he was just sucked into this world. So I wrote a column about this today, and one of the concluding thoughts is, I don't know what to do about this.
Yeah, well, that you and me, but let me ask you about the aftermath for Turning Point. It's a behemoth, and behemoths have to be fed by dynamic leaders. You know how hard it is to lead an organization. Mm-hmm. National Review does its, I guess it's every other year you do your conference where you gather in all the young people. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it was at a National Review conference that my son first decided he wanted to be in politics. He was like 14 years old and heard Larry Kudlow and Arthur Brooks talk. It was fabulous. He just, his world exploded. But Turning Point it's a vast enterprise. It takes a lot of money. Can it keep going?
Yeah, that's what you're putting your finger on something really important. It's something I fear, right? Could this have been an effective assassination in a sense? Because movements like that, you need a charismatic leader. Now, maybe they'll institutionalize themselves and you won't depend on someone with a really unique set of talents and drive of a Charlie Kirk, but I'm not sure. So at the moment, this has been a galvanizing moment. Everyone who is on the fence wants to form a chapter. Great, fantastic. I'm worried about whether that will be captured in a way Charlie would have been able to do it over the medium and long term.
Now, you may be able to help me with this. I'm going to ask Continetti on Friday because he wrote the book, The Right. Young Americans for Freedom was sort of a precursor to Turning Point, and it was Goldwater-ish. And Nixon said of the Goldwater movement to me in 1978, you can't win with just them, but you can't win without them. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Republicans can win without the kind of inroads that Charlie pioneered among the youth demographic. But I don't know, how did YAF come to be and who kept it going?
Well, Bill Buckley and the Sharon Statement were a key moment.
I don't know the Sharon Statement.
Yeah, so the Sharon Statement, named after Sharon, Connecticut, that's the Buckley homestead, had a bunch of college students. I don't know how old he was himself at that point. Still relatively young, but much more established than the average college student. And they hashed out this statement that's, conservative, libertarian kind of statement, kind of credo. And they wanted to counter the Students for Democratic Society. And this had never occurred to me until I actually heard Matt say it a while ago. The conservative movement has always had a huge student element, right? And we kind of lost touch with that. A lot of us were despairing. If you'd asked me years ago, what can we do to win over college students? Like, I don't know. I don't think it's very promising. But Charlie saw the opening, went there and did it himself, and then gave a political expression through his political organizing for the Trump campaign. It's just an extraordinary accomplishment. But Goldwater was significant respects to the youth movement. Reagan, as you know, had a lot of youth appeal, and so did Trump, thanks in part
to Karl Rove ran the CRs when I was in college. He taught field school. That's where I met Karl in 1974, teaching young activists how to be effective in campaigns. I don't think the RNC's in that business anymore. I think they outsourced it to Charlie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing about what Charlie did, it was organic. As you know, political candidates, when they're out on the stump, they hear things that you don't, they learn things, and if they're really good, they adjust. So Charlie went out there wearing a T-shirt when he could gather a crowd of 15 and saw how it's done, saw what moved people, saw what worked, and then built on that like a good candidate. And it just requires, it's a really unique skill. You could, it's the kind of thing, a lot of Trump events. I'm like, you could have 100 political consultants in the room trying to figure out how Trump should do something, and they would never be able to figure out the way he did. You could have 100 of the best political minds try to do what Charlie did, and wouldn't have been able to do it without his unique talents.
It was an incredible. I saw him do it at 18 in a group of about 15 high school students, and it just kept organically growing. Rich Lowry, I look forward to listening to the editor today. Thank you for joining me. Senator Deb Fischer represents the great state of Nebraska. Senator Fischer, welcome. Before I get into the Armed Services Committee, the NDAA, the nominations, did you know Charlie Kirk? I'm just curious. Some people do and some people didn't.
I had met him once when he was in Nebraska. He was at a county Republican dinner in Douglas County, Omaha, Nebraska. I had the opportunity to sit at a table with him many, many years ago. Obviously, young, very young man at the time, and he was there to speak to the group. Did a nice job, of course. He did, and just sorely miss him. He had a.
I have yet
such a
to meet
wonderful
one Republican elected official who hasn't met Charlie, which is remarkable when you think
Yeah.
about it. Not one. So we will miss him a great deal. A great colleague of ours on Salem. Senator, first let's talk about the nomination blockade. Congratulations on blowing that up. Have you moved the first tranche of nominees through yet?
Not yet. You know, we're going to be taking those votes soon. We'll get it done this week. It's really ridiculous what the Democrats are doing. Some numbers that are out there. President Obama, in his first 200 days, he had 292 nominees confirmed by voice vote. President Trump, he's had 135 nominees confirmed, but you know how many by voice vote? 0. That's going to change this week. Yep, it's going to change.
Well, I'm glad that rule has changed because I want the Pentagon staffed, and I'm sure some of these positions are at the Pentagon. I'm sure some are at Justice and at other agencies that are national security agencies. So congratulations on getting that done. Will the NDAA get done? Are the Democrats going to blockade that as well?
Boy, I don't know how they can justify blocking the NDAA. Everyone knows this is the main responsibility of a federal government is to provide for our common defense. We've passed this bill for over 60 years. We had a strong vote out of committee, only one no vote by Elizabeth Warren. So it came out strong out of the committee. And now we have Chuck Schumer, who, through all indications that I've seen so far, I doubt that he's going to get on it. But we'll see. John Thune, Leader Thune's doing a good job. He's pressing Schumer, but you know, the Democrats, they need to press their own leader. They need to talk to Senator Schumer and tell them to do his job. We need to get on that bill and provide for our men and women in the military, give them the resources that they need.
You know, after Midnight Hammer, one would think that everyone would recognize that the B-21s are a necessary, indeed a vital part of our triad. I've always been a submarine guy, but now I can see what they did. Are they provided for the NDAA, and do you think the Appropriations Committee, on which you also serve, you're one of the few people I know who serve on both Armed Services and Approps, so you're in a position to both, here's what we want, and here's what we can buy. So what do you think about the B-21s?
Oh, I think they're vital for deterrence and for the safety of this country. We were able to see as a people in this country how important they are. You know, General Cotton, who is the combatant commander at STRATCOM, he has emphasized that he thinks we need 200 of the B-21s in order to be able to maintain the strength of this country, the strength of our deterrence. We don't want to have to use them, but we want to be able to have what we need to protect this country. So I am a strong supporter, you know, Hugh, of our nuclear deterrent, of the triad, to make sure that we have what we need for our homeland to protect it, but also as an umbrella for our allies.
And to deter what is an increasingly aggressive Russia and a sinister China. So, Senator, we're looking at a Schumer shutdown. Senator Collins chairing appropriations, you're on there with her. Is there anything that can be done other than the political damage that has to be visited upon Chuck Schumer if he shutters the government?
Yeah, I mean, it will be on his shoulders. It will be on the shoulders, the heads of the Democrats here in the United States Senate. You know, we're watching the House now, working on a CR, short-term CR, to get over here to the Senate. And we have already seen no indication that we're going to have any kind of support and bipartisan work on not just passing the CR, but also to move ahead then on appropriations bills. I don't know why the Democrats put up with him as a leader. You know, he didn't have one appropriations bill on the floor last year. And in committee, we passed out 11 of the 12 bills. And Hugh, I can tell you in our leadership discussions, John Thune promised that he would take up on the floor of the Senate appropriations bills if we got him out of committee. We've already passed 3 on the floor, Milcon VA, Ag, and Ledge Branch. And we have 5 more out of committee on the floor. And John Thune is a man of his word, and he's going to do it. You know, Chuck Schumer would talk about stuff, but to be blunt, he never had, I guess, the wherewithal or the courage or the pressure from his members to put the appropriations bills on the floor. Let's be transparent. Let's be accountable to our voters and justify the votes that we take. That's how we're supposed to.
Conventional wisdom is that Chuck Schumer is afraid of he's afraid of his base. But Republicans won't be reckless if a shutdown happens. I think President Trump will try and keep the lights on as long as he can and go down to essentials. But he's not going to close Mount Rushmore and do the stupid stuff that Democrats do. Nevertheless, it's very bad to have the government shuttered. Do Democrats not realize they're going to get blamed for this?
Well, they better be blamed for it. You know, this is one where I don't think they can try and shift the blame to Republicans. It seems that no matter what, Republicans tend to get blamed for any kind of shutdown. This is one that they are going to own. They are going to own the entire thing. And you would think that they would be worried about their constituents and not being able to have services, not being able to access government if they have questions and they're trying to get answers from an agency. It's very reckless, I think, of the Democrats in this day and age when we face so many threats from Russia, from China, from Iran, from North Korea. We face these threats, and they're willing to, for whatever reason, for I guess their own political base to satisfy them in some way, that they would shut down government.
Well, it looks like we're headed that way, and I appreciate your giving us the update, Senator. And my best to the Nebraska bid red until you meet up with the Buckeyes. I'll talk to you after that at some point, but thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Earlier today, I caught up with Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri about his brand new book, The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court, available at Amazon bookstores right now. Let's go to part 2 of that interview. Jumping another chapter now to CRT DEI and When Parents Were the Enemy. Quote, for a long time, the warped lessons that were being taught in our schools were hidden from our parents. Once again, we were seeing the left's playbook in action. A few concerned parents would get something labeled that the left had to take seriously, but get them labeled as domestic terrorists, and the left had to open the toolbox and take out everything, including the FBI. Do you think we have turned that back, Senator?
I think it's in retreat. I think DEI is definitely in retreat. CRT is definitely in retreat. But the concern I think that I have and had in a judiciary hearing with Hermit Dillon was, let's make sure it's not becoming just a different name, right? This ideology, this cultural Marxism isn't just becoming something that we're calling, different flowery language. But it was very clear when I was Attorney General, I write about it in the book, Last Line of Defense, you can get on Amazon right now, is that, and by the way, New York Times bestseller, President Trump loves the book too, Hugh. And what I found was during COVID, we opened up a portal for parents to communicate us. We sued like 54 school districts in Missouri for their masking policies. We got them to back off. To this day, mostly moms come up to me in grocery stores and thank me for that action. But we opened up a portal that unveiled, sort of crazy stuff like my kid decided not to wear a mask. The school then isolated the kid, had the kid eat lunch by himself on the stage in the middle of the gym. These adults should have known better. But also when it came, we use that portal for DEI in our classrooms. And this wasn't in, New York or even St. Louis or Kansas City, but in Springfield, Missouri. You saw the sort of this radical ideology where teachers were being taught and trained to view the classroom by oppressor and oppressed. They had the gender unicorn. They had the wheel of oppression. All this crazy stuff. And then also a school district, we found when a parent communicated with us that kids were being forced, grade school kids were being forced to do something called a privilege walk, where take a step, everybody has their eyes closed, take a step forward if you're white, take a step forward if your parents are married, take a step forward if your dad has a job. And then when the kids would open their eyes, there was all this degree of separation, trying to, again, divide the room. This is core sort of cultural Marxism, and it's in our schools, and we have to root it out. And I think that's why you saw a lot of parents run for school board. That's why we're turning the tide now, but it's in retreat, but it's not dead, and we got to stay vigilant on it.
Now you put on, I'm going to the beginning of the book at the end of the interview. You said in November 2024, the fever broke. My colleague Charlie was murdered last week. The fever didn't break. It's sort of like those fires in California that smolder and then they burst out again as soon as the wind picks up. I don't think it's gone, Senator. Do you?
Well, I think what I meant by that was the crazy excesses we saw during COVID, the crazy excesses we saw from the Biden administration, the lockdowns, the DEI struggle sessions, the CRTs in our school, the Biden censorship enterprise, all that stuff. The American people sat in their own jury box and rendered a verdict, and they voted against that and for President Trump. So in that sense, I think America collectively said we want to get back to common sense. But to your point, as it relates to sort of this kind of radical leftist ideology, which is played out in the YouGov poll that was, recently came out, that a full 25% of self-identified very liberal Americans think that political violence is justified, compared to 3% of very conservatives. Now, that's 3% too many, okay? But the truth of the matter is there's a real problem on the left right now with political violence, and it played out in the most horrific way with our friend Charlie Kirk, who literally was speaking his mind and shot in the throat in an attempt to silence him and assassinate him on live television. And it's just, I'm not playing this both sides thing. If you look at the way this is playing out, the left has a problem with this kind of radical agenda that justifies assassinations and violence, and we have to call it out for what it is.
Senator, I have one more question for you about the last. I have one more question. I'm going to play it after the break. Don't go anywhere. The book is fabulous, The Last Line of Defense by Eric Schmidt, available at Amazon. I do want to remind you I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Relief Factor is a wonderful patron of the program, and it's a wonderful supplement that I take every day, and I take it on the first hour, and you see it on the Salem News Channel. And when you see it on the Salem News Channel, you know I am genuinely taking it every day, like thousands of my listeners in the audience are, thousands of those who are watching on the Salem News Channel. I do it just to prove it, because I don't endorse anything I don't take. Now, a lot of people want to pay me a lot of money to take supplements. And I've always said, no, thank you. Don't need any. Blessed with good health. That might change, and maybe a great supplement will come along someday and they'll persuade me to take it. I doubt it. But Relief Factor makes sense. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, Omega. And thousands of you take it every day. The starter pack is $19.95. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, and they will send you the starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Get rid of the minor aches and pains. Don't put up with pain. You don't have to. If your back hurts, your knees hurt, try Relief Factor. And you get the starter pack as well at their website at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Lilacs is in the house, our favorite humorist, who's been a guest on the Hugh Hewitt Show for 25 years. And so I want to start out with a somewhat somber note, James. Your Substack is jameslilacs.substack.com if people want to lift. Charlie Kirk was 7 or 8 when we started doing this. That's why I think it is so devastating.
Yeah, and who knows exactly whether or not he was turned to the path that he was because he turned on Salem one day. And who is this guy? He might have been like me, who was really impressed with the show and really loved it and looked forward to more, and then realized he was your guest host, and then you came back the next week. But I mean, you've been fantastic. So who knows what impact that you certainly had. 7 or 8, good Lord. Well.
So Lilacs, I have a question for you. Tomorrow I have a column coming out that calls for a Kirk commission, because I don't know what's going on in the dark web. I don't want to go there to find out for myself, and I doubt I would be able to get a grip on it. But I think we got to know. You actually are a web pioneer. You started the bleat like 1,000 years ago. So,
Yeah.
do you have any idea what's going down in the dark web that is turning people into nuts and killers?
It's not the dark web. This is not something that you find via, you log into Tor and have some thing that routes you around to some server in Bulgaria. This is stuff that's right here. This is Reddit, and this is people using Discord. You can use the Discord to have your own little private chats about whatever you want to do. And Reddit itself, Reddit is the damnedest thing because what I use Reddit for is just to check the temperature of local news, to follow some of the habits and television shows that I like, some of the games that I like. But if you are so interested, if you're so motivated, shall we say, you can find nearly every single of intellectual, spiritual perversion and bizarreness at Reddit. And these communities have coalesced around this with their own language and their own lingo and their own support systems. So you don't have to go to the dark web. You can go to Reddit. And a lot of these people know that. 10 years ago, I think Reddit was a place where there was a tremendous amount of free speech. They valued it. And now I have been banned in probably 30 to 50 subreddits for simply saying one word about a Charles C.W. Cook piece about the coronavirus, which subsequently got me banned all over the place. So anybody who's the least bit web savvy, if you have a commission, can find out exactly where these people are meeting. They're spiritually, intellectually, they're dark caves, but they're so easy for these young men to find, and they'll find such support there for the things that they don't want to believe but end up believing anyway, or want to believe so much and want somebody to confirm what they think. That's all you got to do. But yes, by all means, and they find the people who are actually heard about this, thought about it, thumbed up it. The whole general assent and applause that you would feel in these places for people who do things like this is a poison, and it's we have to fit. It's not that we can shut them down because you can't. What you have to do is to make it is so unright for people to go there, is just to delegitimize them so much in the culture and cast them out, and that takes work.
So that's why I suggested a Kirk Commission. I have no idea how to do the making it so not right business. You can't outlaw it. The First Amendment is the First Amendment. But it does
No.
seem to me, last Wednesday, 6 days ago, to me, it took another step that Brian Thompson, CEO of United Health, the murder of the Minnesota Health former House Speaker, two shots at Trump, one that hit him, one that didn't get off. There's too much craziness in the country not to monitor it. I mean, but at the same time, we're just coming out of the era. Eric Schmidt wrote this book, How to Be the Last Line of Defense, on the censorship enterprise of the Biden administration, and it was massive around COVID, and we don't want that again.
No. Well, the killing of the two Israelis in Washington, D.C. didn't come out of the internet. It came out somebody who had gotten his radicalization. Other way, the man who stabbed the woman on the train, that wasn't from the internet. I mean, so yeah, you can't extirpate it all, but it's a good start. But again, it has to be delegitimized in the culture so severely and so completely that people don't go there, because it's like abandoning yourself, jumping across the river Styx and saying, okay, fine, hell's where I want to be, hell's where I'm going to be. But the pathologies that lead young men to do these things, it's so intertwined with the atomic, the atomic nature of our culture, with people so far away and so antisocial, communicating only through the medium of their devices. I mean, it's not everybody, but there's a toxic brew of technology, ease of access, and poisonous nihilism that has been baking in academia for 20, 30 years. And when all these things come together, you have the situation you have now. But like I said, even if you have the Kirk Commission and they get to the bottom of these rooms and the chats and the discords and the rest of it, you're still going to have the maniacs and the goblins. It's not even that. TikTok, for example, and Facebook have been home to some of the most unnerving videos that come across my feed. These bright-eyed, pretty well-manicured goblins who are speaking the most horrible things. They're not coming out of the dark web. They're coming out of Facebook and TikTok and being shared around by people, because the attitude on that side is that, well, thumbs up, wish the other guy had been a better shot. And that sort of casual, hip, meaningless, empty nihilism is something that has to be rejected by everybody. And again, good luck getting everybody to reject that, because it feels virtuous to be so demonic about somebody that you thought was a demon yourself. So
I like your term, goblin. John Podhoretz has said the internet allowed communities to come together that ought never been allowed to come together. And
Yes.
it used to be difficult to find furries, just to use
Right.
a term that I never took it seriously, right? I didn't think they actually
Right.
existed until last week.
Oh,
And
yeah.
now
Oh,
I know
yeah.
they do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, I mean, some of these communities, if you look at furries, for example, are they great? They're the greatest peril to the republic? No, they are not. In a lot of cases, just a lot of silly people with bad hygiene who are dressing up in stinky costumes and going to cons and pretending to be something. I get that. But every one of these little subgroups that split off from the American mainstream seems to have in itself this element to it that doesn't take much to make them sort of repudiate everything good and gold in order to find community in this dank little, pseudo quasi Marxist nonsense about revolution and gender and the rest of it. And again, you have your commission. That's a great idea, but it's not going to get to the heart of the social factors that produce these things. And there I go, social factors. Oh, I could be a caseworker in West Side Story.
I don't know. Well, that's unfortunate because I have no idea after talking to you 8 minutes where to begin. No,
Yeah.
we are not the answer, but we know the question: how to turn
We're
it
not the problem.
around. James Lilacs, thank you. Follow him at jameslilacs.substack.com. Senator Eric Schmidt, author of The Last Line of Defense: How to Beat the Left in Court, available at Amazon.com right now on the New York Times bestseller list. Senator, I wanted to keep you over because I read everything. I thought it's a fabulous book. But then you punched me in the solar plex when I get to the epilogue and I read about Stephen, your son. How is Stephen doing?
Stephen's doing okay. Stephen's a happy kid for your audience. Stephen was born with a rare genetic condition, was diagnosed with epilepsy. He's on the autism spectrum and is nonverbal. Stephen's 21 now, but going, especially when he was really young, he still to this day has seizures nearly daily. But he had a 4-hour seizure when he was really young and in the ICU for over a week. And for me, I went through this discernment process of what I really wanted to do with my life. And Stephen was really the impetus for me to get into public life and try to make a difference. And so Stephen's my kind of my touchstone, and it is so important to me in so many different ways.
That is the best argument for being active in public life that I've ever read, or at least the equal of any of them. And you didn't lead with it. You waited with it. Someone had to finish the book to get there. And it came after, my eyebrows were up when you write How to Win, Dismantle the Administrative State. I agree with that. It's easier said than done, but I do believe you've got the inspiration because of Stephen. Very last question. Are we going to dismantle the administrative state? I think of things like a second reconciliation that repeals the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 in large part, restores the federal government to a size that can be stuff like that. Do you think we can do that?
I do. I'm very hopeful. I think, and why I have a chapter dedicated to the administrative state and the last line of defense that people can get on Amazon right now, which is to kind of mark this 100-year march that really kind of began with our worst president, Woodrow Wilson, that sort of culminated, of course, with this leviathan of government agencies that was weaponized against the American people during the Biden administration. So I think the combination of the Chevron deference being overturned, we had a working group that kind of laid out some options on being more specific with statutes, but also making sure that we take advantage of the opportunity. Maybe it's the REINS Act. I certainly support that. And for your audience, that would be before a new government regulation goes into effect that has an economic impact of pick your number. Congress would have to vote on it first. I would hope we could move something like that. But you also need a willing participant, Hugh, in the administration, the Article 2 branch. And we have that now with President Trump. He's trying to rein those powers in. And I think that's a great sign of inspiration and hope for us.
Senator Eric Schmidt, thank you. The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court, available at Amazon.com right now. Congratulations on the book and come back soon. That ends today's program. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Generalissimo. Thanks all of you for listening. Be sure to go to my YouTube. Go over to YouTube and find Hugh Hewitt. Just Google Hugh Hewitt in YouTube. There are 97,500 of you closing in on that six-figure mark because people want the best of the program every day, the interviews, the commentaries. It's all over at Hugh Hewitt YouTube.